in Europe is much lower than that of the United States. It's currently around 64% in Europe, compared to 77% in the United States. We can no longer afford for people to retire as early as they do, so they'll have to stay working longer. And also, we need more women in the workforce. After all, they are smarter, so we do need more of them there. And also, because of the legacy of the crisis, of high levels of structural unemployment, we need to help people with low levels of education to find jobs and reduce the risk of greater social exclusion. So, those are the drivers of change. That's what they're required to do. So, what the hell is Europe doing about it? Okay, I've told you what's happening, so what is it that we're doing about it? Well, we actually started about 10 years ago to try to do something about these things, because the drivers of change are not new. We faced them 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Europe faced the threat that the skill demands of an aging workforce would be too great, and that would affect our prosperity for the future. That problem still exists, except actually now it's worse than it was in 10 years ago. But we started on a process of trying to improve education and training systems back in 2010. And we agreed a set of benchmarks that are outlined there, that for 10 years member states would work towards. I won't go through them there, you can see. But basically they're there to try to increase the employment rate, and also particularly to get more women into employment, more older people into employment, reduce the number of people who leave school early, raise general levels of academic educational attainment, and encourage more people to participate in lifelong learning. So we started 10 years ago. In 2002, we launched something called the Copenhagen process, which was specifically designed to strengthen European cooperation in vocational education and training. Now, essentially what that is, it's voluntary cooperation with periodic reporting and peer review by countries who inform on the progress that they've made in implementing agreed European objectives to improve vocational education and training. Now, there are 33 countries participating in this process. They all have very different systems. They all have very different starting points, but they are all working along the same objectives. And one of the things that the Copenhagen process provided was a basis to develop what we call European instruments and principles. Now, those are they there. Some of them you may know, and if anybody is interested in more information about each of them, I can give them that later. I won't describe them to you now. Essentially, the purpose of these instruments is to make training systems and education systems more flexible and more open. To make it easier, not only for you to study in your home country and abroad, but also to be able to move between different parts of the education and training system in your own country. It's very difficult in some countries for people to change from general education to vocational education. And also hard to do the same thing without having to go all the way back, to the very beginning again. So the idea is to make these systems more flexible and more open, and not just for young people, but for all the working population. So that it's not just skills and knowledge that you gain through the formal education and training system, but you can use your other skills that you've learned from work or from other experiences in your life, and they can count towards a qualification. This will enable somebody who's been made redundant at 45 years of age, who has skills, but doesn't want to go all the way back round again to try and train to learn something, to have courses tailored to their needs that can lead to a particular qualification. So the idea is to make these systems less age-based, more easily accessible, and more flexible. And of course, supported by guidance and counselling. Because if you're going to have to acquire new qualifications, as you may well do throughout your working lives, change your careers throughout your working lives, do different types of jobs, work even in different countries, you need a system of support and guidance to help you to make the right choices. So this is what we've been working on in the European Union for the last 10 years. So how have we done? Well, on one count, we've not done too well, I'm afraid. Those are the benchmarks there that you saw earlier, and those are what we attained in 2010. And you can see that sadly, we didn't achieve any of them. Now, the economic crisis certainly set the performance back, but we would probably not have achieved them anyway, even without the economic crisis. And so, there remains a substantial amount of work to do. However, despite the fact that we didn't achieve everything, and we didn't achieve anything, to be perfectly honest, on those scores, things are changing. Despite the economic crisis, and despite the fact that we didn't reach those targets, all of the benchmarks show improvements compared to 2000. So compared to 2000, there are more people, despite the crisis, there are more people in jobs overall. Despite the crisis, there are more women in the labour market. Despite the crisis, there are more older people in the labour market. More people are participating in lifelong learning, and the level of education attainment is higher than it was before. So we've not made the progress we wanted to make, but we are slowly making progress. So in summary, what to say? The labour market, the drivers of labour market change, will require people already in the workforce, you, to learn new skills throughout your working life. The job that I do is very different from the job that I did 5 years ago. And I read some statistics, I'm not quite sure how they calculated them or how accurate they are, but that specific job-related skills, as opposed to key skills, communication, autonomy, understanding, whatever, numeracy, literacy, that the specific job-related skills have a shelf life of only about 5 years. After that, the job that you will do will be different, or you will do your job in a different way. What you need is the skills to be able to adapt and to learn how to change to do the new job properly. So you will have to learn new skills throughout your working life. And the response of the EU, really, to respond, the EU needs to construct flexible education and training systems that provide opportunities for you to learn at various points throughout working life and to gain recognised qualifications. And you need the opportunity to gain those qualifications not strictly through school, university, college. You need to be able to show your work experience and for that to contribute towards a qualification. We need to break the strict divisions between vocational education, training and education, and we need to break the stranglehold that the age structure has on our learning systems. If you miss your opportunity to complete an apprenticeship by the time you are 19, you're pretty much lost. What a waste. What a waste of human resources and opportunity for people. We have to break the stranglehold, and it is not easy. That's why we've not made the progress that we wanted to. Every member state has a different system. Every member state has different priorities. Every member state has different vested interests, and we're talking about profound reform. But we need to have the opportunity, provide you with the opportunity, to be able to learn and gain recognised qualifications throughout your working life. And as I've said, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We've made some progress, but we're not there yet. But certainly the trend of reform that we've undertaken under the Copenhagen process has certainly been the right one. It's probably still the best way to respond to the changes taking place in the labour market. The best way to respond to uncertainty is to be prepared and to give you opportunities to be prepared. And that's what we're working towards. So the direction is the right one, and it will continue. Europe has now launched a new strategy called the Europe 2020 strategy. And it has a new set of benchmarks. It has a benchmark of an employment rate of 75%. Not 70, as before, 75%. That's a big target. It has targets of reducing the number of young people who leave school without any qualifications to 10% or less. And it also has targets for levels of education attainment. So we will continue the process. We will continue to develop the instruments at European level, and now we plan to try and implement them to give you a real possibilities, opportunities, and choice. You'll find we've done a more detailed analysis of this, and the things that I've said to you are available here in this book that we have written. So if anybody wants it, I can arrange for you to receive a hard copy or an electronic version. And of course I can also arrange, if you want to look at the figures, for you to have copies of the presentation that I've made today. So pretty much that's it, really. That's all I have to say. I think that we're working up for lunchtime, so. I will take any questions if there are any. Yes.
So I have one question. Currently in Slovakia, through unemployment office, there is no vocational training available whatsoever. Now, the European policies and the CEDEFOP policies are very nice in theory. However, how would you like to achieve these goals in 9 years, so 2020, when none of them are in effect? We're talking about Slovakia. So it's wonderful to have the policies, but how would you like to implement them or give them through to specific states so they will actually become effective and start changing people's education and qualification and so on?
So how are we going to see that the reforms are implemented?
Yes, in 9 years.
It's a difficult question, so I won't answer it anymore. Responsibility for the content, the structure and organisation of education training systems lies with the member state. The European Union is specifically forbidden in the Treaty on European Union to propose anything that would harmonise the systems of the member states. So, member states have to do this. It's their decision, their call. How can we help? Well, the instruments that we developed at European level have the consensus of all the member states. We have the agreement of all the member states. And the member states have all agreed to implement them. And we have a timetable, we have a time scale where implementation is supposed to be taking place. And in many countries, progress is being made. We also have the process of a constant review and monitoring as to what member states are doing and how far they've gone with the implementation plans. And the other thing that the EU has is money. And we do use the money in the European social funds and through other programmes to encourage member states to implement the reforms. We are using it, for example, in Greece. The European qualifications framework is supposed to be linked together with national qualifications frameworks from all the countries in the European Union. Greece is working on one now. We've supported that with funds. And that should be, the national qualifications framework of Greece should be linked to the European qualifications framework by 2011 or the end of this year or next. So things are happening. It's up to the member states, but things are happening, and we try to encourage them to do it through a combination of embarrassment, if they don't do anything, and money from European funds and programs. It's difficult, but we do what we can. Any more questions, or are you all hungry? A teacher always has one. Yes, go on.
Something that is really quite impressive from what we heard from you is that in the horizon of 2020, 9 years from now, the biggest shortage of skills will lie in the middle level of qualifications, in the intermediate professions, the vocational level. So that logically would imply that there should be a sort of reprofiling of the whole educational system of member states. And I'm saying that because in countries like mine here in Greece, the biggest part of the investment, I mean, I'm not talking only about the money, but also psychological investment, expectations of parents and children, lies with the superior grades of education. And we don't have enough, tomorrow we don't have enough sun plumbers, green engineers around. And that is something really crippling, as I understand. I've read quite a lot about that. So the question is, I know, of course, because I'm teaching that stuff to students, but I know that the EU cannot do that for the students. But somehow, someone has to exert pressure on member states, governments, in order to rearrange, reprofile their educational systems in favor of these intermediate levels of skills, skill requirements. So are there any tools around? Are there any levels of pressure? That's the question.
Okay, there's two aspects to this. First of all, young people. Okay? Young people are actively encouraged to go on to higher education. Some of them are forced onto it by cultural circumstances, other expectations, the desire of parents to see their children do better than they did. This pressure, this culture exists everywhere, in all member states. And there is a problem in terms of the parity of esteem between general education and vocational education. General academic education has a status that dirty vocational education does not. And we are seeking to address this. We are seeking to address this from member states. But the choices about what level of education someone goes for will lie always with the individual. And what will happen is there will be something like a qualification inflation, and it's already visible now. What you used to be able to do with a degree 20 years ago, you now need a master's for. And what you will need a master's for later, you'll need a PhD for. So there is an inflation in terms of the qualifications. And what will happen is that people, more highly qualified people, will end up taking more lowly qualified jobs. That's what will happen. The other aspect is, there's something like 76 million people in the European Union who have no qualifications at all. So almost